Hey guys, it's me Sasuke43, and I'm here for a bit different of a cooking video today. A while back on a live stream, I asked some people if they would be interested in me sharing some of my more healthy recipes instead of desserts and sweets, and lots of people seemed really interested in it. Thing is, lots of these recipes are pretty short, and I don't really think they can take up a whole video. So I decided to compile 5 different recipes into one video. Lots of these recipes can also be made gluten and dairy free. So if you're working with someone that has food allergies or celiac disease, you can still make them really good food, and I will go ahead and list the alternatives as they come up. Anyways, without further ado, let's get into our first recipe. We have pancakes, everyone's favorite breakfast except mine. I'm a waffles person, but I already made a video about waffles a long time ago. So starting off, you want to take 2 tablespoons of shortening or butter, put that in a pan, and take that over to the stove to melt. While we're waiting, go ahead, get an egg, crack it open, hopefully better than I did. Don't do that, that's messy. And it got some eggshell in it, oh boy. And we want to remove the eggshell and beat the egg until it's nice and fluffy. And then we're going to add our dry ingredients. So 1 cup of flour, half a teaspoon of salt, 3 teaspoons of baking powder, and 1 tablespoon of sugar. Now that our butter or shortening is all melted, you want to go ahead and take 3/4 cup of milk and add that to your butter so it can heat up a little bit and give a nice warm mixture. You don't want to bring it to a boil or make it super hot, just get it so it's above room temperature. For this, you can also be using dairy-free milk, margarine or dairy-free butter, or gluten-free flour. And then go ahead and give your dry ingredients a light mix just so that way when you put it in case it's too hot, it does not cook the egg. And then go ahead and add in your wet ingredients and whisk it through. If it seems a little too thick or it's lumpy, add a little bit more milk, whisk it again, and you can keep doing this to get the consistency you want. So if you want a thinner mixture, go ahead and add some more milk. Now we're going to go ahead and fry it up, go to the stove, and we are going to cook it up over medium heat and fry it in, once again, butter or shortening. And go ahead and just put your mixture in the skillet. And you can go ahead and give your skillet a little shake to spread the batter out if it's a little bit thick. And if you want to add anything to your pancakes, now is the time to do it. You can put tons of stuff in it. You can put things like blueberries, pecans, chocolate chips. If you want to do it, now is probably the best time as opposed to mixing in the entire mixture. I love how this batter rises, by the way. These are very light and fluffy pancakes, and that's what makes me like them. And then gotta give it a little flip. I am so bad at this. Whoop. Okay, that didn't go half bad. Okay. Anyways, the real trick of frying something is to go ahead and try and only flip it once. So you want to cook it on the bottom until it's almost cooked all the way through, and then flip it over. After that, you want to only have to lightly cook a little bit more until it's nice and golden, and then it will be done. And if you don't eat all the mixture up in one day, you can go ahead and store it in the fridge for about 2 days. You want to put it either in an airtight container or put some plastic wrap down so it's touching the mixture to keep it from forming a skin in the fridge. And there are our pancakes. I overcooked the pecan one a little bit. Lots of people like to put butter and syrup on their pancakes. I personally like to take some fruit and pecans and heat them up over the stove a bit and pour them over. That's my favorite thing to put on pancakes and waffles. And this recipe also has a lot of variations written in there, so I'll let you go ahead and pause the video and read these if any of them sound interesting to you. I haven't personally tried out any of them, but they sound like they'd be something really cool to try one day. Next is a family favorite, Parmesan Chicken. This stuff is really quick to make and comes out really, really good. All you really need is 2 bowls and a casserole dish, and you want to go ahead and lightly grease that casserole dish. And we're also going to preheat the oven at 375 degrees Fahrenheit. Now in the first bowl, you want to go ahead and you want to put in mayonnaise. I know, it sounds very weird, but I made this for my brother. He doesn't like mayonnaise. He actually didn't even know there was mayo in this recipe. In the next bowl, you want to put in some breadcrumbs. I use the Italian ones because I like the seasoning, but you could also use gluten-free breadcrumbs if you so need to. And you're also going to pour in some shredded Parmesan cheese, along with a little bit of salt and pepper. I'm not giving any measurements here because I always just eyeball it. I've never once measured this recipe. I usually go 2 parts cheese, 3 parts breadcrumbs, and then just salt and pepper to taste. That's really all you need to do. And you can go a little lighter, a little heavier. It's not really going to affect the taste too much. And just give the breadcrumb mixture a tiny little mix, and there you go. Now for this, I'm using boneless chicken tenderloins, but you could also do it chicken in the bone if you want to. I just think this comes out a little better. I also recommend using thawed chicken as opposed to frozen. I haven't tried it with the frozen. I don't know how well it would turn out because I imagine it'd be a lot harder to get the batter to stick to something that isn't really wet. And then all you do is you cover the chicken in mayonnaise, and then cover it in the breadcrumb mixture, and then put it in the pan. And you just do this until all of your tenderloins are done. I always take the leftover breadcrumb mixture and sprinkle it over the top because sometimes it can get a little thin, and for that reason, I'll often just put some more breadcrumbs and cheese to cover the chicken out the rest of the way and give it a little more flavor. Then just go ahead, put it in the oven to cook, and I've actually found it cooks perfectly in 22 minutes every single time. I don't know why, but that's just it for me in my oven. Now in a saucepan, go ahead and take some tomato sauce and just heat it up. This is something very, very nice to have with the chicken. And after the time's up, go ahead, take the chicken out, and you can just cut a piece in half, see if the meat is white, and that is how you know it is done. And there you go, a nice and easy main course for your dinner, and it goes really good with a side of creamed corn and broccoli. Although my brother really likes mashed potatoes. And we've got another classic favorite, meatballs. This recipe is great for either spaghetti and meatballs or meatballs and hoagies. It's something my family has made for a long time, and they are just delicious. Now I'm making a triple batch here because we make a whole bunch and then stick them in the freezer and take them out as we need them. So I'm using 3 pounds of meat in this recipe, but I'm only going to give you the quantities for 1 pound. So if you're making a larger batch, remember to double or triple this recipe. The first thing you'll need is 1 cup of torn bread. I'm just using Italian bread here because I make it myself and it's really easy to do. Although this is another time where you could go ahead and substitute gluten-free bread if you so need it. And you want to put the bread into a large bowl. We have a lot of ingredients to add, so make sure it's a big enough bowl. And to the bread, we are going to add a 1/4 cup of milk, and this is another place you can add a substitution and use something like coconut milk or almond milk if you so need to. Next, you want to go ahead and finally chop up half a small onion. I'm using this cutting device even though it makes the camera shake like nuts because it gets it really, really fine and nice, and cutting onions by hand just sucks, honestly. Next, in the skillet, you're going to take a tablespoon of olive oil, put in your onion, and you're going to want to cook that for about 6 minutes or until the onion is transparent. And then we're going to add the onion to the bread mixture, along with 2 tablespoons of freshly chopped parsley. If you are not using fresh parsley and you are instead using dried, only put a tablespoon. When using dried herbs, only put half of what the recipe calls for. And you're also going to add half a teaspoon of thyme. The recipe actually doesn't specify if it's fresh or dried, so your guess is as good as mine on this one. I assume it means dried because it calls for fresh parsley and then just thyme, doesn't say fresh thyme. If you think it's too strong, you can go ahead and just put half of the thyme in. And then we're going to go ahead and put in salt and pepper to taste. I know, very, very vague. Trust me, I wish it gave exact measurements too. So just throwing stuff at the wall until it sticks, I'm going to just give a rough guess and say put in half a teaspoon of salt and then 3/4 teaspoons of black pepper. That's nothing written down, I'm just trying to give you some guidelines here. Put in more or less, eyeball it. You can't really taste it because it's raw meat, so I don't know what they expect you to do. And of course, lastly, you want to go ahead and add in your ground beef. I am also adding in a pound of sweet Italian sausage. I had sausage meatballs once, and then we were like, oh my god, we have to add this to our recipe. Because it's pre-seasoned, I basically seasoned this as if I was seasoning 2.5 pounds of meat instead of 3. I know, if you want to follow along with me, you're going to have to do math. I am so sorry. And now comes the not so fun part. Hopefully, if you got your meat out of the freezer, you've given it plenty of time to warm up, because have fun trying to stir it with a spoon. You have to use your hands, basically. I have done this with like icy cold meat before. Your hands go numb very quick. But you want to get that very well mixed until it is all combined. Now you want to get a cookie sheet that has a rim around it. If you use a flat cookie sheet, as the meat cooks, it'll let out a bunch of grease and oils, and that will all just fall into your stove and make a big mess. So make sure you do that. And I lined mine with parchment paper to go ahead and make cleanup a lot easier. But go ahead and scoop out your mixture onto the trays. I'm using a cookie scoop to make the meatballs as uniform as possible. But you could use anything else that would be more uniform. I don't really recommend eyeballing it because you're cooking these all together and you kind of don't want to have a ball that's really small and completely cooked while you have a bigger one that's big and raw in the middle. After you have them all scooped out, it is now at this point I recommend you preheat your oven, and once again we're preheating it to 375. Now, because these balls are very rough, we can't cook them like this, so go ahead, take them in your hand, and roll them into actual balls. The best thing about cooking with meat is that it doesn't expand, so you can fit an awful lot on a tray without having to worry about them getting stuck together. After you have them all rolled out, go ahead and put them in the oven. And I went ahead and put them in for about 18 minutes. For meatballs the size I made, that's about what you want to go for, but if you're making really big ones for something like hoagies, you'll probably want to cook them for longer, like about 35 minutes. And because this takes a very long time, I just put the trays in as I rolled them and stuck the second tray on the bottom shelf, which it cooks slower on there, so that one had to stay in for a little bit longer. Now to tell when they're done, I can normally tell when the tops are becoming a darker brown. So when you see that, it's a good idea to go ahead and take them out, and you can cut one open and take a look at it. And most likely it's done, so you can go ahead and remove your trays. And there are some amazing meatballs. Like I said, works great for spaghetti, works even better for hoagies. And they store in the freezer very, very well. Now maybe you're a little more like me and you don't like to have the meat in your pasta pushed to the side and you like it to be a big part of the dish. In that case, meat sauce. A while ago, I kind of just took a bunch of stuff I liked, put it in a pot, and called it meat sauce, and I really, really liked it, actually. So this is that recipe, although you can really put just about anything in. If there's a vegetable you really like, throw it in, by all means. If there's a vegetable you really don't like, take it out. So coming in with that, I am chopping some carrots because I freaking love carrots. But any vegetable you use, you want to go ahead and you want to chop it and get it into tiny pieces. And the next thing I'm using here is a green bell pepper. I love bell peppers a lot. So I am putting the whole thing in because I really like vegetable forward stuff. And I'm also going to be putting in about half an onion here. And then this is the one that'll probably come as a bit of a surprise, but zucchini. I have found that the zucchini here is what really brings the dish together. Quite a few people don't like zucchini, and I respect that, but I do, and even then, it goes very, very good in this sauce. And of course, you can't really do something like this without mincing up a clove of garlic. That would be anarchy to have no garlic. Anyways, you want to put your 4 carrots, that was even too much for me, I had to take some out, 1 bell pepper, half an onion, 3 small zucchini, and garlic into a pot. Into it, of course, you want to add tomato sauce. And I also went ahead and added some Italian seasoning to taste. I like a lot of it, and as you can see, this is a very big pot. Now I only put in about 2.5 jars of sauce. Part of the reason is the pot won't really hold much more. And another thing is, I'm freezing this as I do a lot of things. And you can get a lot more mixture in the bag when it's lighter on the sauce, and then just when you heat it up, add some more sauce to it. It's not really a big deal, although if you're making this to serve at a dinner tonight, I recommend putting in a lot more sauce. Anyways, we're going to go ahead and turn the heat on and let that cook the veggies. Now in a skillet, you want to go ahead and fry up a pound of ground beef. As you can see, I have a 1/4 pound of sausage. I just had a little bit left, so I figured I might as well cook it up into here. Although I actually didn't really like sausage in this meat sauce recipe very much, so if you're doing this, I would recommend leaving the sausage out. Anyways, you want to try and keep the ground beef in as tiny chunks as possible, and you want to cook it until it's all the way done, and then drain it. And of course, it's a meat sauce. You pour in the meat, you give it a stir, and then go ahead and cover it and let it simmer for a bit. After everything is heated through and it's all combined, it's ready to serve. Honestly, this stuff is so good, I could just eat a bowl by itself without even having any noodles. I love it so much. And the last recipe for this video will make a great side dish to spaghetti and meatballs and the meat sauce. This is perfect for it. We are talking about biscuits. This recipe is really easy and quick to do, and it comes out so good, I probably make this recipe myself about once a week. Like if you go up to me and say, "Hey Sassy, have you made biscuits this week?" The answer is probably yes. So, starting off, you want to take a 1/3 cup of butter or shortening. If you're using butter, you want it to be softened here. Into it, you want to add 1 3/4 cups of flour, 2.5 teaspoons of baking powder, and 3/4 teaspoon of salt. And now you want to take a pastry blender and work the butter through the dry ingredients. If you don't have a pastry blender, you can also use your fingers and rub the butter into the flour mixture. I just like having a pastry blender because it's so much easier. But you're going to work it until your mixture resembles fine crumbs. Into that mixture, you want to add 3/4 cup of milk. And give it a nice stir. You don't really want the dough to be super moist. You want it to be something that you can form into a ball and it'll hold its shape, but you also don't want it to be something that's going to be like sticking and coming off your fingers. I actually made a little too moist here, but that's not a very big deal. Anyways, go ahead and take a cookie sheet. Once again, I lined mine with parchment paper. And go ahead and just scoop out your biscuits onto the tray. This recipe will make about a dozen biscuits depending on how large you make them. And because mine were a little bit sticky, I had to flour my hands to go ahead and roll them into balls. But after you have them all rolled out and aligned on the sheet, go ahead and squish them down and place them into your oven that is preheated to 425 degrees. And depending on how large you make them, it can take between about 14 to 20 minutes to cook. And if you like biscuits with soft sides, you can go ahead and place the balls of dough right next to each other. But once they're all done, go ahead and take them out of the oven, and these are great to have with butter or jam. But this recipe has some variations I want to share. In a saucepan, go ahead and take some fruit. You can use fresh, I'm using frozen. Add some sugar to taste. I don't really like stuff that's super sweet. I like this stuff a little more tart, so I'm not adding a lot. But you put some sugar, some cornstarch, and you want to go ahead and cook it until everything is nice and cooked through and the cornstarch has left a thick glaze. And now we're going to go ahead and make the biscuits, which this is a good time for me to add in. You can make these gluten and dairy-free very easily. This is a recipe that works great with gluten-free flour. And if you're looking for a flour recommendation, I am using King Arthur's gluten-free flour. As far as flour goes, I like this one. It's not too expensive. I get this off of Amazon, so there's an easy place to get it. I like it a lot. Not a sponsor. Not that I think I have to really say that, because I'm never going to get sponsored. And of course, for the milk, you can go ahead and substitute it with something like coconut or almond milk. I personally have found coconut milk to be a little thicker and closer to the texture of regular milk, so that's why I like using it. But stuff that's gluten-free tends to dry out very quick, so I recommend making this and eating it right away and not letting it sit on the counter all day. And to keep it more moist, I also like to add a little more milk to this and make it a very sticky dough. It's completely up to you if you do this or not. Maybe try it both ways and see which one you like better. I just prefer to have more milk. Anyways, I'm going to make a few biscuits here to show you how those cook. I don't really want to flour my hands for this, so I'm just making my hands damp and then going ahead and patting them down here. And now to the remainder of the dough, I'm going to add some sugar and cinnamon to taste. And I got those berries that we cooked up a little bit earlier in a nice little dish here. And I'm going to go ahead and put this biscuit dough on top. And we are going to put both of them in the oven here. And yes, I am cooking them at a slightly lower temperature. For some reason, I just found the gluten-free stuff cooks a little better at lower temperatures. Also, for some reason, I found gluten-free flour does not brown on top as well as regular flour does. So you have to be tuned in and kind of just aware of when it's going to be done. When it is, go ahead and take it out, and you have a nice mixed berry cobbler that goes great with a scoop of ice cream. And once again, if you're looking for a recommendation, Simple Truth has something that is made with almond milk. That stuff is absolutely delicious. I love that more than dairy ice cream. It is so good. And that is an amazing little dessert. This is supposed to be a healthy recipe video and I just ruined it. Oh my god. And we're not done with the variations yet. We have one more to go. We're going to go ahead and just make up this dough as normal. And to it, we are going to add half a cup of shredded sharp cheddar cheese. Once again, I think I made the dough way too moist. I've gotten used to making the gluten-free ones. It's rubbed off. But go ahead and put those in the oven. And now you want to take some butter and garlic powder and melt those. Now when your biscuits are done, go ahead and take them out and brush the tops with the melted garlic butter mixture. This variant here I have written down as the Cheddar Bay biscuit recipe from Red Lobster, although I've never been there, I've never had the biscuits, I'm not really a good judge, but these are still stupidly good. And those are some ways you can make baking powder biscuits. And one final thing to end this video with. Not a recipe, just a little baking tip. When you're making gravy, add a little bit of soy sauce to it. It helps give it a great flavor and honestly just makes the gravy so much better. And once again, you can use cornstarch instead of wheat, and it thickens it very nice and is good for people with celiac disease. Although it doesn't store in the fridge as well, I have found stuff made with cornstarch. After it stores, like the liquids and solids kind of separate and you can't really get them back together, so that's just my tip on that. But there we have it, 5 different recipes. I love all of these. So you go ahead and tell me, out of the ones I've showed you, which one is your favorite? Which one are you most likely to make? And if you have made one, let me know how it turned out. I'd love to hear it. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Later.